is dispatch to all units. Urgent notice. Gunfire reported at Sector 9. Suspect down. Officer weapon registered as match. But officer claims he never fired. Repeat. Officer claims he never fired. Proceed with extreme caution. Case flagged as sensitive.
Detective Laura Hayes had seen enough inconsistencies in her career to stop believing in coincidence. But that night, something was different. She arrived at the scene before forensics, her boots crunching over shattered glass, the cold wind slicing through the warehouse's broken windows. In the center of the dimly lit floor, a body lay face down, blood pooled around the torso. The victim was male, mid-30s, dressed plainly. But it wasn't the scene that made her stomach turn. It was the weapon on the ground. A standard issue, Glock, with the serial number scratched but still legible under forensic light. That number matched a weapon issued to Officer Darren Cole, a respected patrolman with a clean record. Moments later, Cole himself stood nearby, hands trembling, eyes wide, repeating the same thing. "I didn't shoot. I never pulled the trigger." His voice cracked, not from guilt, but disbelief. Laura had heard liars before. She could spot rehearsed panic, guilt masked as confusion. But Darren wasn't acting. There was something raw in his voice, something broken. He wasn't trying to clear his name. He was trying to understand what had happened. No witnesses, no cameras working, and no fingerprints on the gun, not even his. Yet the ballistics would later match his firearm exactly, a weapon last logged in during his previous shift, and supposedly stored at the station's armory. The question wasn't just how the gun got there. The real question clawed at Laura's mind as she looked into Darren's pale, shaken face. If he was telling the truth, then who pulled the trigger, and why use his weapon to do it? She didn't know yet, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just another open and shut case. This was something designed to look like one. At the precinct, Officer Darren Cole sat silently in the interview room, shoulders hunched, eyes locked on the table as if it held answers he couldn't find. Detective Hayes watched him through the one-way mirror, arms crossed, heart heavy. She had worked alongside Darren before. He wasn't perfect, but he was clean, thorough, cautious, never once involved in a misconduct report. What shook her most wasn't his presence at the crime scene, or even the weapon tied to him. It was how lost he looked, as if something had been ripped from him. She stepped into the room and placed the forensics report on the table, letting the silence settle. Darren didn't look up. "You know this gun?" she said, her voice steady. He nodded slowly. "It's mine. Or was." She slid the report closer. Ballistics matched, but no prints, not even yours. That made him look up. His eyes were red, not from tears, from exhaustion. "I logged it in, checked it, locked it, same as always. Laura, I swear." She believed him, and that scared her more than if he had confessed. Something wasn't right. She flipped open another folder. Photos of the body, trajectory diagrams, timestamps. All clean. Too clean. Everything pointed in one direction, but it all felt planted, like someone had drawn the crime around Darren, painted the guilt. With precision. She leaned in. "Did you leave your locker open? Did anyone else have access?" Darren shook his head. "Only the quartermaster and Captain Rhodes." The mention of Rhodes caught her attention. He'd retired last month. Quietly. Unexpectedly. Laura made a note. She didn't like where this was going. A respected cop, a retired superior, a body with no history, and a weapon tied to a man who swore he never pulled the trigger. The victim's name was never released. No missing persons matched. No priors, no family stepped forward. Just a lifeless man in his late 30s, found in an alley behind a shuttered pawn shop. The bullet entered just below the clavicle, a single, precise shot, No struggle, no defensive wounds, almost clinical. But what haunted Detective Hayes was the look on his face. Not fear, not pain, almost peace. Like he knew the shot was coming, or worse, wanted it. His pockets were empty, save for a torn receipt from a gas station 2 counties away. No wallet, no phone, no ID, only the slug retrieved from his chest, traced back, without margin of doubt, to Darren Cole's sidearm. Laura kept running the evidence through her mind. It was too aligned, too neat. Real cases were messy, prints smudged, angles off, timelines fuzzy. But this? It felt built, designed. As if someone wanted Darren to be the only suspect. But why? That night, after her 3rd cup of coffee, she pulled up the precinct's locker room footage. 12 hours archived. She fast-forwarded past quiet halls and empty benches, then paused. 2 weeks before the shooting, at 03:47 a.m., a figure entered. Hoodie, gloves, calm. They approached Darren's locker with a key, not a crowbar. The door opened smoothly. A small flashlight clicked on. The figure reached in, pulled something out, something black, metallic, and left. Laura froze the frame. The face was never revealed. But the shoes, black boots with a torn left sole. She had seen them before. On the security footage from the alley. The killer had worn them too. Her breath caught. This wasn't just a setup. It was personal. Someone had gone through careful lengths not just to frame Darren, but to make sure no one would question it. Detective Laura Hayes didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, out of obsession. Every frame of footage, every angle of that silent figure haunted her like a ghost without a name. She played it again and again. The slow entry, the practiced movements, the eerie calm of someone who wasn't breaking in, but entering with full confidence they belonged there. That kind of access didn't just happen, it meant internal help. A copy of the key, knowledge of the camera blind spots, familiarity with the precinct's layout. She knew what that meant. Someone on the force, someone who wanted Darren silenced. Not just by conviction, but by narrative. She printed stills of the figure's boots and began cross-referencing every recorded entry to the building in the past 6 weeks. No easy task. Hundreds of shifts, dozens of uniforms, faces blending into monotony. But the boots stood out. On footage from the previous Tuesday, a janitor's cart rolling past the evidence room. There they were. Torn left sole, unmistakable. But the man pushing the cart wasn't registered. No maintenance records, no name. Just a face, slightly turned, enough to reveal a scar below his right eye. Laura froze. That scar. She'd seen it before. Mugshot from 3 years ago. An informant in a trafficking case. Thought to be dead after a warehouse fire. But what if he wasn't? What if someone had pulled him out, turned him, used him? Her gut twisted. This wasn't a random murder, nor a simple frame job. It was something deeper. A message. And Darren wasn't the only target. That receipt in the victim's pocket, the gas station, it burned down a week ago. Arson, no suspects, no footage, just one word spray painted on the back wall in red. Remember. The word remember had shown up before, in cases that were closed too quickly, evidence that vanished, or witnesses that changed their stories overnight. To anyone else, it was graffiti, coincidence, a meaningless scrawl from some angry kid with a spray can. But to Laura, it was a calling card, a warning, or worse, an invitation. She pulled the old files. 3 other incidents, different districts, different victims. But each one had 3 things in common: burned locations, missing footage, and that word painted in red somewhere on site. Each case had a fall guy, someone who confessed, someone the public believed. But Laura noticed the same flaw in every confession. The timeline never quite matched, as if the person knew too much, or too little, as if they had been told what to say. She opened Darren's interrogation tape again, this time not focusing on him, but on the background. The hallway outside. A faint shadow moves across the frosted glass at exactly 2:13 a.m. According to logs, no one was on duty there. She enhanced the frame. Not clear enough to identify a face, but the boots. Again, same torn sole. That man wasn't just planting evidence. He was watching, supervising, making sure the story played out the way it was meant to. She sat back in her chair. Her hands were trembling, and she hadn't noticed until her coffee spilled across. The files. She didn't even flinch, because something in her gut said this was about more than Darren, more than a single precinct. Someone had the power to rewrite events and force others to believe them. Remember. She whispered the word to herself, but the more she stared at it, the more it didn't feel like a message. It felt like a trigger. Laura didn't sleep that night. She drove across the city in silence, retracing the crime scene, but not where Darren had confessed. She drove to the warehouse listed in one of the discarded case files, the one from 2017, the one no one ever solved. The structure was condemned, but the lock had been replaced, recently. Inside, the scent of burned plastic and stale concrete still clung to the air, and there it was again. On the far wall, faded but unmistakable. Remember. She moved closer, flashlight in hand, and saw something new beneath the word. A set of numbers, half erased. A date. A badge number. She took a photo, but the moment the flash hit, her phone shut off. Black screen. Battery full. She reached for her notebook, only to realize it was missing. It had been in her jacket, zipped in, moments earlier. She felt a chill on her spine, turned, and saw nothing. Just the sound of something dripping far in the back, too rhythmic to be water. She left, fast. When she got back into her car, a printed photo lay on her passenger seat. It showed her at her desk, from earlier that day. But she hadn't printed anything, and no one else had access to her camera feed. At the bottom of the photo, scrawled in that same red ink, it read, "We remember for you." Her hands locked around the steering wheel, but her mind spiraled. She was being watched. Not by Darren, not by the department, but by someone who knew every step before she made it. Someone playing God with memory. And if that were true, she wondered how much of her own life was real. And what had she forgotten? That they were so desperate for her not to remember. 3 days later, Laura was called into internal affairs. Not for misconduct, but for mental wellness screening. A vague, polite way of saying, you're too close to something. She entered the gray room and found two unfamiliar men already. Seated, suits without badges. No introduction. Just a folder with her name on it, and a sealed envelope with the initials MK. She opened it cautiously. Inside, a copy of the warehouse photo she'd seen in her car. Only now it had something added, a silhouette in the background watching her. "Do you remember seeing this figure?" one man asked. Laura blinked. She hadn't seen that shape before. But now that she looked at it, it looked like someone she once knew. Someone from years ago. A case that never went to court. "We think you're experiencing residual trauma," the other man said. "Sometimes our memory plays tricks." But their eyes were too still. Too rehearsed. Laura didn't respond. Instead, she asked, "Why is my desk camera being accessed remotely?" Silence. Then one of the men stood up, leaned over and whispered, "If you keep asking the wrong questions, you might forget what you came here to do." He smiled, as if it were a joke. But Laura didn't laugh. When she returned to her precinct later that evening, her login was revoked. Her desk, cleared, her badge, suspended pending evaluation. It didn't feel like a demotion. It felt like a shutdown. The more she pushed, the more her world shrank. As if someone was rewriting her life in real time. And when she got home that night, her front door was already unlocked. Everything inside untouched, except for one thing. Her reflection in the hallway mirror had a note taped to its surface. "You're almost there." That night, Laura didn't sleep. She sat on the floor of her living room, the mirror note, still in her hand, reading the words over and over. "You're almost there." Almost where? And who was guiding her? She turned off every light in the apartment, unplugged every device, taped over every camera, yet she still felt watched. Her phone rang once at 3:12 a.m. No caller ID, no message left. At 3:17, a different tone. A message, just one sentence. They lied about the second bullet. Her stomach dropped. That detail had never been made public, not even mentioned in the internal report. Laura had only found it in the ballistics lab by accident, a second entry wound that disappeared from every document after day one. She ran to her old files, pulling out photocopies she kept hidden. And there it was, an early scan showing both wounds. But something else stood out now. The report was signed. Not by her, not by her partner, but by someone who had died 4 years ago, Captain Hale, her former superior. He had died in a boating accident, or so they said. She pulled up his obituary, and the photo sent a chill down her spine. Behind Hale, blurred and in the background, stood the same silhouette from the warehouse image. Same coat, same frame, same distance. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a shadow walking through time. Her thoughts spiraled, but her gut was clear. This wasn't about a single case anymore. This was a pattern, threaded through other reports, other accidents, other officers who went quiet after asking too much. She wasn't chasing a suspect. She was chasing a ghost in the system, a name buried so deep it didn't want to be found. She left her apartment before sunrise, driving toward the evidence storage facility, not the main one, the older satellite unit just outside the city, where cold cases were boxed up and forgotten. Her badge barely got her in. The clerk looked her over twice, but didn't ask questions. Inside, rows of steel shelves stretched into darkness, each lined with files no one had opened in years. She moved fast, using an old inventory code from the warehouse case. Box 117B, 4th row, 3rd shelf. She opened it, expecting paperwork, maybe blood samples. But instead, she found a VHS tape, unlabeled, dusty. She blinked. No chain of custody slip, no dates, no reason it should be there. Against protocol, she slid it into her jacket and left. Back home, she rummaged through a box of her father's old electronics until she found a working player. She hesitated, only once before hitting play. The static cleared to reveal a familiar scene, the warehouse from the footage. But this wasn't surveillance. This was handheld. Someone had been inside. The camera tilted, showing her partner, Detective Miles, crouching near the tarp. He wasn't alone. The second figure appeared at the edge of the frame. Same build, same coat, same silence. But this time, the figure spoke. Not a full sentence, just a word. Her name. Laura. Her heart stopped. Miles didn't react. Only the camera caught it. Then the screen glitched, and the tape ended. She rewound it 5 times. Same result. The voice wasn't distorted. It was familiar. It was her own voice, whispering her own name. She froze. Was it a warning? A future? A memory she hadn't lived yet? She didn't know. But whatever this was, it wasn't over. It was calling her deeper. and now she had no choice but to follow. The next morning, Laura walked into precinct headquarters as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Her steps were slower, more calculated. She nodded at familiar faces but didn't really see them. Her mind played the tape on loop. The voice, her name, her tone, as if the footage had reached back in time, pulling her into something she hadn't yet experienced. She wasn't just solving a case anymore, she was unraveling herself from it. She stopped by the archives department, pretending to check the progress on unrelated cases. On her screen, she discreetly typed in a search query, Case 117B, but every attempt returned the same message, restricted, not closed, not filed, just restricted, bold, and blinking. She turned to her supervisor's door. It was closed, blinds drawn, not unusual, but suddenly suspicious. She looked around. Everything looked normal, too normal, like a movie set, propped up just enough to fool anyone not looking closely. That's when she noticed it, a small black envelope resting in her inbox. No address, no stamp, just her name, typed on a slip of thin paper. She opened it slowly, half expecting it to be blank, but inside was a photo. Grainy, surveillance style, a frame frozen in time, a hand, gloved, male, holding a standard issue, police firearm. The timestamp in the corner read 3:17 a.m., the same minute the gun had supposedly been fired in the case she was warned not to investigate. Written on the back, in the same thin font, "You were never meant to remember." Her pulse spiked. This wasn't just about Miles, or the gun, or the dead man. It was about her. Someone had erased something, not just records, not just evidence, but her memory. And now they were warning her. Stop before you remember it all. Laura left the precinct without saying a word. Her badge felt heavier in her pocket. She drove aimlessly, for a while, unsure if she was escaping something or chasing it. Every streetlight flickering felt like a warning. Every pedestrian glance seemed just a second too long. At a red light, she reached into her glove compartment, pulled out her old field notebook. The one from her academy days. Dusty, worn, forgotten. She flipped through the pages, and there, on the final blank page, she noticed handwriting that wasn't hers. Slanted, neat, familiar. 117B was never about him. It was about who pulled the trigger after the lights went out. Her stomach turned. She hadn't written that, but she recognized the pen. It was hers. Had she written it and forgotten? Or had someone written it for her to remember? As paranoia crept in, she looked into the rearview mirror and saw a black SUV parked a few car lengths behind. Unmarked, idle, lights off. But it had been behind her for 3 turns. She pulled away quickly, heart pounding, turning corners without using signals. Eventually, the SUV vanished. But the fear didn't. She pulled into the parking lot of an old motel, the kind where cameras don't work and no one asks questions. She checked in under a false name. Once inside, she locked the door, drew the curtains, and opened her laptop. Using an old backdoor protocol she'd learned from her cybercrimes training, she accessed a redacted folder from the precinct archives. It took minutes. Inside were only 2 files, one audio clip labeled Room 6B, and a still image titled Witness Duck 12. She clicked the image. It loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, and when the face emerged, it was her, but younger, different, terrified. She stared at the image for minutes. The timestamp said it was from 7 years ago, dated exactly on the night of a fire at a building. Laura had no memory of ever entering, but there she was, in grainy grayscale, looking directly into the surveillance camera as if she had seen what was about to happen. Her face was swollen, her hair shorter, her eyes wide with something between horror and understanding. The file name, Witness Number 12, echoed in her mind. 12 was the number of officers on the 117B task force. One of them had died. One had disappeared. The others, she now remembered, had all resigned without explanation. One committed suicide, all within a month of seeing the footage. That phrase again, the footage, the one everyone referred to but never described. She checked the folder again, only the image and the audio clip. She hesitated, then pressed play. Static, then breathing, then a voice. Her voice. This isn't about the case, it's about the memory. If you're hearing this, you've already seen it. Or worse, you're about to. The recording cut. Laura slammed the laptop shut. Her heart felt like it had no rhythm left. She grabbed her badge, looked at it, and felt something break. She went to the bathroom, splashed water on her face, stared into the mirror, and whispered, "Who the hell am I?" She didn't know if she was being followed or if the paranoia had finally cracked her. But the one thing she did know, deep in her gut, was that the truth wasn't in the evidence room. It wasn't in the reports. It was somewhere buried in her own memory. And something, or someone, was making sure she never got it back. Not without a price. That night, she returned to the precinct, not as an officer, but as someone chasing a ghost wearing her own face. The halls felt quieter, as if the building itself was aware of her intent. She didn't sign in, didn't speak to anyone, just walked straight to the evidence archive. Every step echoed with a weight she couldn't explain. When she reached locker 87, the one where the 117B case materials were supposed to be stored, she found it empty. Completely clean. No box, no envelope, no sign anything had ever been there. She checked the logbook. The entry from earlier that day, her own handwriting, was gone. Just white out. Nothing else. As if the moment had been erased in real time. Panic rose in her chest like a slow suffocation. She rushed to the internal database, logged in with her badge, still active somehow, and searched for 117B. No results. Then Miles Kenner. No results. Then her own name. Just one entry. Pending suspension. Psychological review. She sat there, frozen. Not from fear anymore, but from something worse. Validation. They were rewriting the story while she was still in it. She reached for her notebook. The only thing left that felt real. As she opened it, a folded paper fell out. One she didn't remember placing there. It was a torn photo. Her and Miles. Standing in front of a boarded-up building. Smiling. Time-stamped. 5 years ago. She flipped it over. 4 words written in black marker. They won't believe you. Her hands trembled. Not from shock, but from a new creeping certainty. She had been a part of whatever this was. She just didn't remember it yet. And someone, something, was making damn sure she never would. Unless she chose to defy it. She left the precinct, without saying a word. The cold outside bit harder than she remembered, or maybe her skin just wasn't hers anymore. The photo remained clenched in her fist, crumpled and slightly damp from sweat. She didn't go home. She couldn't. Instead, she walked until her legs ached, until the streetlights blurred into silent witnesses. She found herself outside the same building from the photo, boarded up, forgotten, the paint peeling off like dead skin, but the door was slightly ajar, as if it had been expecting her. She stepped inside. The air was thick. Dust didn't move. Time didn't move. It was like stepping into a preserved moment, untouched by everything but memory. On the floor, in the middle of the room, was a chair, and on it, a cassette recorder. No wires, no explanation, just one button, play. She pressed it. The voice that played wasn't hers, wasn't Miles, but it said her name, over and over, calmly, like a lullaby. Then it said, "If you're listening, you survived the deletion. You're not supposed to be here." The tape hissed. A silence followed. Then a second voice, familiar but distorted, spoke. They needed a scapegoat, someone to wear the story. You were chosen. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked around the room as if the walls might answer. The voice returned. If you want to remember, leave the tape here. If you want peace, burn everything. Then silence. Nothing more. Just that unbearable choice echoing inside her. Truth or peace. She took the tape, slipped it into her coat, and stepped back outside. Snow had started to fall. Gentle, almost. Beautiful. As if the world didn't know, or didn't care, what she had just uncovered. But someone knew. And they were watching. She vanished the next day. No alerts, no official report. Just her desk left untouched at the precinct, her badge resting on top, and a file marked Case 460R sealed shut. But something odd lingered. Every officer who walked past her desk reported the same sensation. The feeling of being observed. One said the badge was still warm. Another swore they heard a whisper coming from the file. When someone finally opened it, there was nothing inside. Just a photograph. The same one she held that night. But this time, she was in the picture. Sitting in the chair, eyes closed, as if asleep, as if erased. The timestamp had changed. It now read a date 2 weeks into the future. No one could explain it. No one wanted to. The case was archived, locked under internal affairs, and eventually forgotten. But rumors grew, whispers behind closed doors. A new recruit once asked about the case and was transferred the next day. Miles Kenner's name never appeared again in any report, but his badge was found in a thrift store 3 states away, sold for $5. Still functional, still warm, and somewhere, on the darker corners of the internet, a thread appeared. No author, no comments, just the photo, and a question. If you disappear from every system, do you still exist? They say the thread gets deleted every time someone tries to reply, but always comes back. Same post, same timestamp. As if waiting for someone else to remember. As if memory itself had turned into the last surviving evidence. Not of a crime, but of someone who once tried to tell the truth and was written out of it. Erased. Except for one last echo.